Okay, we're on chapter 6, tea for 2. So, as you can see, I already have my tea. It's sugar cookie flavor. So if you could just pause the video right now and get yourself some tea, we could reenact this. Pretty much we just sit around, talk, and drink tea. Rowan and Eragon parted at the outskirts of Carvajal. Eragon walked slowly to Broom's house, engrossed in his thoughts. He stopped at the doorstep and raised his hand to knock. Ah, still hot, and not very tasty. So I've got to try candy cane. Maybe next time. A voice rasped. What did I do for Brom again? What do you want, boy? That's not it. He whirled around. Behind him, Broom leaned on a twisted staff, embellished with strange carvings. He wore a brown hooded robe, like a friar. A pouch hung from the scuffed leather belt clasped around his waist. Above his white beard, a proud eagle nose hooked over his mouth and dominated his face. Proud eagle nose? Hmm. He peered at Eragon with deep-set eyes shadowed by a gnarled brow and waited for his reply.
To get information,
Eragon said.
Roran is getting a chisel fixed, and I had free time, so I came to see if you could answer a few questions.
The old man grunted and reached for the door. Eragon noticed a gold ring on his right hand. Light glinted off a sapphire, highlighting a strange symbol carved on its face. You might as well come in. You might as well come in. We'll be talking a while. Your questions never seem to end. Inside the house was darker than charcoal, an acrid smell heavy in the air. Now for light. Eragon heard the old man move around, then a low curse as something crashed to the floor. Ah, here we go. A white spark flashed, a flame wavered into existence. Broom stood with a candle before a stone fireplace. Stacks of books surrounded a high-backed, deeply carved wooden chair that faced the mantel. 4 legs were shaped like eagles. Again eagle. I mean on the same page. 2 times compared to eagles. Same animal. Shaped like eagle claws. You could have had it like hawk nose or hawk claws or something. And the seat and back were padded with leather embossed with swirling rose patterns. A cluster of lesser chairs held piles of scrolls. Ink pots and pens were scattered across the writing desk. Make room for yourself. But by the lost kings, be careful. This stuff is valuable. Careful is in italics. Eragon stepped over pages of parchment covered with angular ruins. He gently lifted a cracking scroll off a chair and placed him on the floor. A cloud of dust flew into the air as he sat. He stifled a sneeze. Brooms bent down and lit the fire with his candle. Good. Nothing like sitting by the fire for a conversation. He threw back his hood to reveal hair that was not white, but silver. And then he hung a kettle over the flames and settled to a high-backed chair. Now, what do you want? He addressed Eragon roughly, but not unkindly. Doesn't make too much sense.
Well,
said Eragon, wondering how best to approach the subject.
I keep hearing about the Dragon Riders and their supposed accomplishments. Most everyone seems to want them to return, but I've never heard a tale of how they started, where the dragons came from, or what made the riders special, aside from the dragons.
A vast subject to tell about, grumbled Broom. He peered at Eragon alertly. If I told you the whole story, we would still be sitting here when winter comes again. If I had to explain all the flaws in this book and its sequels, we'd still be sitting here again when summer comes again, because it isn't winter. Oh, it is winter. Oh, okay. We'd still be sitting here when winter comes again. It will have to be reduced to a manageable length. Reduce it. But before we start properly, I need my pipe. Before we start properly, I need my tea. Better. Everyone waited patiently as Broom tamped down the tobacco. He seemed to mind taking down. No, okay. The old man was okay. He liked Broom. The old man was irascible at times, but he never seemed to mind taking time for Eragon. Eragon had once asked him where he came from, and Broom had laughed, saying, "A village much like Carvajal, only not quite as interesting." Carvajal's not that interesting. Curiosity aroused, Eragon asked his uncle. Curiosity aroused, Eragon asked his uncle, but Garrow could only tell him that Broom had bought a house in Carvajal nearly 15 years ago and had lived there quietly ever since. Is it a coincidence that Eragon is 15 and Broom came in about 15? I don't think so. Broom used a tinderbox to light the pipe. He puffed a few times, then said, "There, we won't have to stop except for tea." Now, we won't have to stop except for tea and opinions. Now about the riders, or short-to-go, as they were called by the elves. How would he know this, huh? Where to start? They spanned countless years, and at the height of their powers, held sway over twice the Empire's lands. Numerous stories have been told about them, most nonsense. If you believed everything said, you would expect them to have the powers of a lesser god. So what's a greater god and what's a lesser god? How much power does a greater god have and how much power does a lesser god have? How would we know this? We don't know this. So, yeah. That's not the greatest metaphor. Scholars have devoted entire lives to separating these fictions from fact, but it's doubtful any of them will succeed. However, it isn't an impossible task if we confine ourselves to the three areas we specified: how the riders began, why they were so highly regarded, and where dragons came from. I shall start with the last item. Everyone settled back and listened to the man's mesmerizing voice. Dragons have no beginning, unless it lies with the creation of Alagaza itself. And if they have an end, it will be when this world perishes, for they suffer as the land does. They, the dwarfs, and a few others are the true inhabitants of this land. They lived here before all others, strong and proud in their elemental glory. Their world was unchanging until the first elves sailed over the sea on their silver ships.
Where did the elves come from?
Interrupted Eragon.
And why are they called the Fair Folk? Do they really exist?
Broom scowled. Do you want your original questions answered, or not? They won't be if you want to explore every obscure piece of knowledge.
Sorry,
said Eragon. He dipped his head and tried to look contrite. No, you're not, said Broom with some amusement. He shifted his gaze to the fire and watched it lick the underside of the kettle. If you must know, elves are not legends. They are called the Fair Folk because they are more graceful than any of the other races. They come from what they call Alalia, though none but they know what or even where it is. Well, shouldn't it be where or even what? I think that would make more sense. Now, he glared from under his bushy eyebrows to make sure there would be no more interruptions. The elves were a proud race then, and strong in magic. At first, they regarded dragons as mere animals. From that belief rose a deadly mistake. A brash elven youth hunted down a dragon as he would a stag and killed it. Outraged, the dragons ambushed and slaughtered the elf. Unfortunately, the bloodletting did not stop there. The dragons massed together and attacked the entire elven nation. Dismayed by the terrible misunderstanding, the elves tried to end the hostilities, but couldn't find a way to communicate with the dragons. Thus, a greatly abbreviate a to greatly abbreviate a complicated series of occurrences, there was a very long and very bloody war, which both sides later regretted. At the beginning, the elves fought only to defend themselves, for they were reluctant to escalate the fighting, but the dragon's ferocity eventually forced them to attack for their own survival. This lasted for 5 years and would have continued for much longer if an elf called Eragon hadn't found a dragon egg. Eragon blinked in surprise. "Ah, I see you don't know of your namesake," said Broom.
No,
The kettle whisked stridently. "Why was I named after an elf?" "Then you should find this all the more interesting," said Broom. He hooked the kettle out of the fire and poured boiling water into 2 cups. Handing one to Eragon, he warned, These leaves don't need to steep long, so drink it quickly before it gets too strong. Eragon tried a sip, but scaled his tongue. Broom set his own cup aside and continued smoking the pipe. I want to have a bit of tea as well. Oh shoot!